In the beginning, there existed only two: Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. From their union were born the 12 Titans, and Kronos was the last. From their union were born first the 12 Titans, beings of tremendous power destined to rule the universe. The last to be born was Kronos, who from his earliest moments showed a nature different from that of his brothers. While Oceanus dominated the waters that surrounded the world, Hyperion controlled the sunlight. Coeus presided over intelligence. Creus commanded the constellations. Iapetus forged humanity's destiny, and the Titanesses Themis, Rhea, Tethys, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, and Thea governed various aspects of existence. Kronos developed an ambition that would eclipse them all. Where his brothers saw in Uranus an all-powerful father, Kronos perceived a tyrant who must be overthrown. After the Titans were born other extraordinary beings: the 3 Cyclopes called Brontes, Steropes, and Argis, one-eyed giants capable of forging divine weapons, and the 3 Hecatoncheires known as Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges, monsters with 100 arms and 50 heads each, whose strength surpassed comprehension. But Uranus, upon contemplating the terrible power of these creatures, felt profound fear. As soon as the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires were born, he would take them in his celestial hands and hurl them back into Gaia's womb, condemning them to remain prisoners in the depths of the earth. Gaia suffered terribly with her monstrous children imprisoned in her entrails. Her pain made the highest mountains tremble, cracked the deepest valleys, and caused earthquakes that shook the foundations of the world. The suffering of the primordial earth knew no bounds, and each passing day increased her resentment toward Uranus. Finally, Gaia could no longer bear the agony. She gathered her Titan children in a deep, secret cavern, where her words would not reach Uranus's ears. With a voice that made the ancient stones resonate, she addressed them. She spoke of her endless pain, of the injustice of keeping the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires imprisoned without cause, and asked that someone have the courage to confront their father to end this cruelty. The Titans listened to their mother's words with growing unease. Oceanus murmured something about the impossibility of challenging Uranus's absolute power. Hyperion openly expressed his fears about the terrible consequences such a rebellion would bring. Iapetus shook his head firmly. The other brothers remained silent, intimidated by the magnitude of what Gaia proposed. Only Kronos took a determined step forward. Without any hesitation, Kronos declared that he would take charge of ending his father's tyranny if Gaia provided him with the necessary weapons. His brothers recoiled at such audacity, but Kronos stood firm, looking directly into his mother's eyes. Gaia recognized in her youngest son the courage she needed. She descended to the most secret depths of the earth, and there forged a terrible weapon, a scythe of adamantine, metal harder than the most resistant diamond and sharper than any sword ever created. When Gaia placed this weapon in Kronos' hands, the scythe glowed with its own light. Gaia's instructions were precise. That very night, when Uranus descended from the sky to unite with her as he had done since the beginning of time, Kronos should be hidden and waiting for the precise moment. A single blow would suffice, but it would have to be accurate, swift, and completely merciless. Kronos nodded and concealed himself among the primordial shadows, waiting for the moment that would forever change the balance of the universe. When Uranus descended from the starry sky to unite with Gaia, as he had done every night since time began to exist, Kronos silently emerged from his hiding place. He spoke no words, made no threats or warnings. In one fluid and terrible movement, he raised the adamantine scythe and castrated his father with a cut so clean and definitive that fate itself was split in two. Uranus's scream resonated throughout the cosmos with an intensity never heard before. His lament split the newborn stars, made the pillars supporting the sky tremble, and created echoes that still resonate in the most violent storms. The divine blood of the mutilated sky fell upon the earth in enormous burning drops, each charged with creative power. From this sacred blood were immediately born new beings, the vengeful Erinyes, terrible goddesses with serpents for hair and fire-throwing eyes, destined to pursue those who committed family crimes. The giants, of tremendous strength, who would later challenge the Olympian gods themselves. And the Melia nymphs, sweet spirits who would inhabit the sacred ash trees. The severed genitals of Uranus did not fall to earth, but were cast into the sea by the force of the blow. Where they touched the salt waters, these began to churn violently, creating a white and brilliant foam. From this sea foam was born Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, who emerged completely adult and perfect, floating upon a seashell. As he withdrew forever to the most remote heights of the cosmos, bleeding and mutilated, Uranus cast upon Kronos a curse that would resonate through all ages. With a weakened but prophetically powerful voice, he declared that just as Kronos had betrayed him, he himself would be betrayed by his own offspring. One of his future children would become his downfall. This curse would accompany him until the end of his days. Kronos laughed with disdain as he cleaned the divine blood from his weapon. The curses of the defeated are like wind. They make noise but don't move mountains. However, despite his apparent contempt, Uranus's words were branded into his mind like red-hot iron. With Uranus defeated and withdrawn, Kronos became the new lord of the universe. His first act was to free the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires from Gaia's womb. The three Cyclopes emerged first, staggering after their long imprisonment. Their gratitude was so intense that they immediately offered to forge divine weapons for Kronos. The three Hecatoncheires emerged afterward, with their 100 arms moving like gigantic serpents and their 50 heads speaking in unison to express their eternal loyalty. Their power was tremendous. But Kronos, observing the terrible power of these beings and vividly remembering Uranus's prophetic words, began to feel unease. These beings were too powerful, too independent. Without warning, he ordered them sent back to Tartarus. When Gaia asked him in confusion why he was imprisoning again those whose liberation had been the motive for the rebellion, Kronos responded coldly, "True power is never shared. It is taken completely or lost forever." Gaia remained silent at this response, but in her ancient eyes gleamed a spark of disappointment. Firmly established in power, Kronos fixed his throne on Mount Othrys and began to organize the cosmos according to his will. He distributed domains among his Titan brothers. Oceanus received control over all waters that encircled the world. Hyperion became lord of the sun and light. Themis was put in charge of justice and divine laws. Mnemosyne became responsible for guarding memory and knowledge. Under Kronos' reign began what would later be known as the Golden Age, a period of perfection that would never be repeated. Kronos created the first human race, the Golden Men, beings who lived in a state of perpetual blessing. This first humanity knew no old age, for their bodies remained young for entire centuries. Diseases did not exist. War was an unknown concept. Hunger never tormented them because the earth provided everything without work. The fields produced golden fruits without need of sowing. Trees dripped honey sweeter than any nectar, and rivers flowed with nutritious milk. The very concept of work did not exist because nature abundantly provided everything necessary. Death, when it finally came after centuries of full life, came like a peaceful sleep. For complete centuries, Kronos ruled with genuine wisdom. The mortals of the golden race venerated him not from fear, but from authentic love and gratitude. No crimes existed because there was no need that could drive one to commit them. Conflicts were impossible when everything was abundant. In those golden days, Kronos fell deeply in love with his sister Rhea, the titaness of fertility and motherhood. Rhea possessed a beauty that changed with the seasons. She was beautiful as eternal spring, with hair that waved like fields of ripe wheat and eyes green as the most fertile meadows. Her laughter made flowers bloom wherever it resonated, and when she cried, her tears became blessed rains. The wedding between Kronos and Rhea was celebrated on Olympus itself with unprecedented magnificence. All the Titans were present. Oceanus emerged from the depths, carrying the most perfect pearls from the ocean floor. Hyperion made the sun shine with special intensity. The Muses sang melodies so beautiful that their echoes still resonate in the deepest corners of the sacred mountains. It was a perfect union between Kronos' absolute power and Rhea's creative fertility. For a considerable period, mutual love completely filled Kronos' heart and managed to drive away the dark shadows that occasionally visited his mind. In Rhea's arms, the king of the Titans found genuine peace that calmed his nightly fears. Rhea had the gift of tranquilizing his anxieties and restoring his confidence. But when Rhea announced she was expecting their first child, everything changed radically. Uranus' prophetic curse, which had remained latent, suddenly awakened with terrible force. Nights transformed into nightmare scenarios, where Kronos saw with frightening clarity a son of his wielding the same adamantine scythe he had used against Uranus. The day Hestia was born, Kronos and Rhea's first daughter, the king of the Titans, waited outside the room where his wife was giving birth, pacing nervously. When the midwives brought him the newborn, he took her in his arms. The baby was absolutely perfect. She had her mother's bright green eyes and already showed in her tiny face the sweetness that would later characterize her as goddess of the hearth. As he contemplated his daughter's innocent face, Kronos murmured to himself that he would not make the mistake his father had made. Uranus had allowed his children to grow until they became a real threat, but he would be wiser. No child of mine will live long enough to become the instrument of my destruction. Without further delay, Kronos opened his divine mouth to tremendous proportions and swallowed Hestia completely. The girl disappeared into the depths of his divine stomach, where she would remain alive, but prisoner in absolute darkness. Rhea screamed with pain so intense it made the most ancient mountains weep and the very heavens crack. It was a sound that had never before resonated in the universe, the primordial lament of a mother for her lost child. "What have you done? She is your daughter, your own blood." "She is my announced downfall," Kronos replied. "I prefer present pain to tomorrow's betrayal." The tragedy repeated with each new birth. When Demeter was born, the future goddess of cereals, Kronos repeated the horrible act without hesitation. The baby disappeared into his jaws while she still retained the sweet smell of birth. Hera, destined to become queen of the gods, suffered the same terrible fate, followed by Hades, the future lord of the dead, and Poseidon, who was destined to rule all seas. All these divine children remained alive in their father's belly, growing slowly in absolute darkness, nurturing day after day a growing anger against the father who had condemned them to this terrible existence. With each child he devoured, Rhea became more silent, more distant. Her laughter, which once made flowers bloom spontaneously, had been extinguished forever. Her gaze had become glassy and hopeless. She no longer sang the songs that gladdened the hearts of all creatures. She had become a shadow of the radiant goddess she had been. Rhea pleaded, cried until her tears formed rivers of pain, cursed the day she had agreed to marry Kronos, but he had become completely deaf to everything except the constant whispers of his paranoia. Each child he devoured increased his guilt, and each new guilt fed his fears, creating an infernal cycle of violence and terror. "When will this madness end?" Rhea asked desperately. "Only when no potential heir remains who could betray me in the future," Kronos invariably replied. When Rhea became pregnant for the 6th time, her accumulated pain had transformed into iron determination. This time, she would not allow Kronos to destroy this innocent creature as well. During a particularly dark night, she secretly made her way to Gaia's ancestral domains. Gaia, who had watched with growing horror her son Kronos' actions, immediately understood her daughter-in-law's suffering. She advised her to flee immediately to the island of Crete, where on Mount Ida there existed a sacred cave protected by powers so ancient that not even Kronos could detect what occurred within it. "The local nymphs will help you in childbirth, and I will personally take charge of hiding the child." Rhea undertook the most dangerous journey of her existence, fleeing in the silence of the darkest night she could find. The journey was extremely painful because labor had already begun, but her determination kept her moving. She arrived at the sacred cave of Mount Ida precisely when the labor pains became unbearable. There, in the depths of the earth, among millennial stalactites that dripped like petrified tears of Gaia herself, was born the child who was destined to forever change the fate of the universe. The newborn let out a roar that resonated like that of a lion taking his first vital breath, and his eyes immediately blazed with the power of the lightning he would eventually wield as a weapon. His name would be Zeus, and in him would be concentrated all the contained fury of his devoured brothers. Following a perfectly coordinated plan, Gaia took a stone the exact size of the newborn baby and carefully wrapped it in swaddling clothes perfumed with the same sacred herbs that had accompanied all previous births. Meanwhile, the local nymphs took the real Zeus toward the most secret depths of the cave. Rhea returned to Kronos' palace carrying her perfect deception. Despite her nervousness, she managed to maintain the same serene and resigned expression she had perfected during previous births. "Here is your new son," she said with a voice that did not tremble. Kronos, blinded by the routine of his paranoia and completely unable to suspect that his wife could have the courage to deceive him, took the bundle without even examining it. With the same mechanical gesture he had repeated 5 previous times, he swallowed what he believed to be his 6th child. The stone disappeared into his divine stomach, where it settled alongside his living children. But Kronos noticed no difference whatsoever. While Kronos congratulated himself for having successfully eliminated his latest potential threat, Zeus grew in secret in the sacred mountains of Crete, surrounded by protectors who had sworn to keep him safe. The goat Amalthea, a sacred animal endowed with special divine powers, nursed him with milk that granted him superhuman strength. The bees of the entire region constantly offered him golden honey that not only nourished him physically, but increased his natural wisdom. The Kuretis, sacred warriors of Crete who descended from the first men created by the gods, protected the divine child with absolute devotion. Each time Zeus cried or made any noise that might reveal his presence, these warriors immediately clashed their polished bronze shields and sharp spears, creating a deafening din that could be heard throughout the island. From his distant palace on Mount Othrys, Kronos occasionally heard these noises coming from Crete, but his paranoia was so focused on direct family threats that he interpreted these sounds as mere normal religious celebrations of the Cretan mortals. It never occurred to him that they might be protecting the very instrument of his future destruction. The nymphs Ida and Adrastea personally took responsibility for the daily upbringing of the future king of the gods. They taught him all the secrets of nature, the true names of all living creatures, the magical songs that had the power to make plants bloom out of season, the secret rituals that controlled the changing of seasons. As the years passed, Zeus developed extraordinary powers. Not only did he grow in physical strength, but his wisdom expanded at an extraordinary rate. He learned to control the basic elements. He could make it rain with a gesture, create powerful winds with his breath, make the earth tremble beneath his feet. All the animals in the region instinctively recognized him as their natural king. He could speak with eagles, command wolves as if they were domestic dogs, and the fiercest lions would lick his hands with docility. But Zeus's most notable characteristic was his supernatural capacity to perceive truth in all situations. He could see through any lie and perceive the real intentions of any being that approached him. In his eyes grew day by day the same flame of determination that had burned in Kronos' eyes when he wielded the scythe against Uranus. But alongside this determination shone something his father had completely lost: genuine compassion for others' suffering and an innate sense of justice. When Zeus finally reached adulthood after years of secret growth, he had transformed into a young man whose beauty was dazzling and whose physical strength surpassed that of any being that had existed before. His height was greater than any mortal's. His voice naturally had the resonant power of thunder, and when he walked, the earth itself seemed to respond to his presence. Metis, the Titaness of wisdom and cunning, daughter of Titan Oceanus, had secretly followed Zeus's growth from his earliest years. She became his closest advisor and was the one who prepared the special potion that would be key to freeing his imprisoned brothers. A complex mixture of rare herbs and magical substances that had the specific power to completely reverse the divine digestive process. The moment of vengeance had finally arrived. Zeus returned to his father's palace, adopting the perfect disguise of a young cupbearer seeking employment. His physical appearance was so perfect and his manners so refined that no god present at court suspected his true identity for a moment. He presented himself before Kronos during a great banquet, adopting an attitude of completely false but absolutely convincing humility. "My lord," Zeus said with a honeyed voice, "I am a new servant who wishes to honor you above all other gods of the cosmos. As a show of my eternal devotion, accept this offering." He offered him a finely crafted golden cup, filled to the brim with divine nectar secretly mixed with Metis' potion. The brew had been prepared with extreme care to have an intoxicating aroma and absolutely delicious taste that completely concealed any trace of its true purpose. Kronos, pleased by the beautiful young man's reverence and thirsty after the prolonged banquet, drank the cup's contents in one long draught, savoring every drop of the apparently pure nectar. For a few moments, nothing happened. Kronos continued conversing with the other Titans, laughing and drinking as always. But then the potion began its work with ruthless speed. The Titan King's stomach began to convulse violently, and his entire body rebelled against him with a force he had never experienced. First, he vomited the stone he had believed to be Zeus. The rock rolled across the palace's marble floor with a sound that resonated like the first thunder the universe had heard. Then, before the astonished eyes of all present, his children began to emerge. One by one they emerged from their father's belly. First Poseidon, then Hades, after that Hera, Demeter, and finally Hestia. They had grown completely during their prison in digestive darkness, and they emerged as adult and powerful gods, ready for the battle they knew would come. Poseidon brandished a trident he had forged with his own divine strength during the years of captivity. Hades wore a helmet that made him invisible at will. Hera radiated with royal majesty that intimidated all present. Demeter wielded sheaves of golden grain that promised abundance or famine according to her will. And Hestia burned with the sacred fire of the eternal hearth. "Father," said Zeus, removing his cupbearer disguise and revealing his true divine form that radiated power in visible waves. "I am Zeus, your son, whom you thought you had devoured so many years ago. Your reign of terror has ended. The time has come for you to pay for your crimes against family and justice." Kronos slowly straightened, wiping his lips stained by divine vomit. Despite the shock of the revelation and the pain of having lost all his children in one blow, his gaze recovered the primordial fierceness that had led him to overthrow Uranus. "So the prophecy is fulfilled," he murmured with a bitter smile. "My son, you have learned well the lesson of betrayal that I taught the world. But I am the Lord of this universe from before the stars learned to shine. I will not fall as easily as my father." Zeus radiated divine power, and in his eyes burned the fire of long-postponed justice. "The difference between you and me, Father, is that I do not rule by fear, but by right. You have devoured your own children, imprisoned the innocent, turned fatherhood into tyranny. And what do you propose to do about it?" Kronos laughed with disdain that could not hide his nervousness. "I brought the golden age to humanity. Under my reign, mortals knew perfect happiness." "I have come to bring justice," Zeus replied, and for the first time lightning shone in his hand as a promise of the storm to come. Thus began the Titanomachy, the war that split the cosmos in two and would last 10 complete years. For an entire decade, the universe became a battlefield where two irreconcilable conceptions of power faced each other: the tyranny of fear represented by Kronos, and the authority of justice embodied by Zeus. Kronos quickly gathered his Titan brothers who remained loyal to him. Oceanus emptied the seas to create tsunamis that reached the highest clouds. Hyperion darkened the sun and turned light itself into a cutting weapon that blinded enemies. Rhea unleashed all the winds of the cosmos to create hurricanes that uprooted entire mountains from their foundations. Iapetus forged weapons from the fire of Earth's center, creating swords that burned with eternal flames. The Titanesses also joined the battle. Themis perverted justice to serve established power, creating laws that favored Kronos. Mnemosyne erased strategic memories to create total confusion in enemy ranks. And Phoebe blinded opposing warriors with false visions that made them attack their own allies. Zeus commanded his newly freed brothers with a strategy that combined brute force and intelligent tactics. Poseidon raised new seas to counter Oceanus's tsunamis, creating aquatic battles that made the oceans boil. Hades opened deep cracks in the earth to swallow enemies, turning the battlefield into a labyrinth of deadly abysses. Hera coordinated military strategies with royal wisdom that rivaled the best generals. Demeter grew gigantic plants that served as living fortresses, capable of moving and attacking on their own. Hestia kept alive the sacred fire that gave supernatural strength to all Olympian fighters, ensuring they never became completely exhausted. For 10 complete years, the cosmos bled in a war that surpassed any previous conflict. Mountains melted under the supernatural heat of battle, oceans boiled like gigantic cauldrons, and stars fell from the sky like burning tears of the gods. Neither side achieved definitive victory, and it seemed the war could continue eternally, gradually destroying all creation. The war seemed destined to last forever, until Gaia, tired of the destruction that tore her body like thousands of knives, addressed Zeus with advice that would change the course of the conflict. "My grandson," she said with a voice that contained all the wisdom of the ages, If you truly seek justice as you proclaim, prove it by freeing those whom Kronos imprisoned without justification. The Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires have remained in Tartarus for eons without having committed any crime, except being different and powerful. Zeus immediately understood the wisdom of these words. He descended to Tartarus accompanied by Poseidon and Hades, and there they found the 6 prisoners, the 3 Cyclopes and the 3 Hecatoncheires, weakened by eons of confinement, but not broken in spirit or will. "My brothers," Zeus told them as he personally broke their adamantine chains with his own hands, "you have suffered unjustly for too long. I offer you complete freedom and the opportunity for vengeance against he who imprisoned you without cause." The Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges wept tears of gratitude that shone like pure diamonds. In gratitude for their liberation, they immediately forged for Zeus the lightning bolt that would become his legendary weapon, a projectile of pure light that could pierce any defense and destroy any target. For Poseidon, they created the magical trident that could split entire continents and create earthquakes with a single blow. For Hades, they forged the helmet of invisibility that made him completely undetectable by any being, mortal or divine. The Hecatoncheires, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges swore eternal loyalty to Zeus with voices that resonated like avalanches. With their 100 arms each, they could throw 200 mountain-sized rocks per second, turning any battlefield into a deadly and unstoppable rain of projectiles. With these powerful new allies, the war radically changed course. The final battle was fought on the plains of Phlegra, where the fate of the entire universe would be decided once and for all in a definitive confrontation. Kronos and Zeus faced each other in the center of the battlefield, father against son, past against future, established order against revolutionary justice. The air itself was torn by the supernatural power of their clashes. Zeus's lightning cut the air like serpents of white fire, while Kronos unleashed all his primordial fury accumulated during millennia of rain. "You should never have been born," roared Kronos, creating a storm of pure energy that made the very pillars of heaven tremble. "And you should never have become a tyrant," Zeus replied, hurling lightning that illuminated the entire cosmos like a second sun. "Your reign of terror ends here and now." The personal combat lasted 3 days and 3 nights without pause. Kronos fought with the desperation of one who has lost everything and knows there is no possible return. Zeus fought with the iron determination of one who seeks justice for all past victims and a better future for all beings. Finally, when the 4th dawn began to shine weakly on the horizon, devastated by battle, Zeus gathered all his divine power into one final lightning bolt, the most powerful he had ever created. The discharge pierced all of Kronos' defenses and definitively brought him down. The great king of the Titans fell like a collapsing mountain, and with his fall, the entire universe shuddered from its foundations to its most remote limits. His defeat marked the end of the Golden Age and the beginning of the Olympian reign that would forever transform the nature of the cosmos. With the war ended after a decade of destruction, Zeus convened a great trial to determine the fate of all defeated Titans. Not all had supported Kronos to the end. Oceanus had remained neutral during most of the conflict. Themis had changed sides at the crucial moment upon recognizing the justice of Zeus's cause, and Prometheus had actively fought alongside Zeus from the beginning. These were pardoned and maintained their positions of honor in the new cosmic order. But Kronos and the Titans who had followed him to the bitter end were condemned to Tartarus, that prison situated beyond the world of the dead, surrounded by impenetrable bronze walls and eternally guarded by the grateful Hecatoncheires. "Father," Zeus said as the adamantine chains closed around Kronos for the last time, "Your punishment is not personal vengeance, but necessary justice. You have demonstrated that absolute power corrupts even the wisest." Kronos, defeated but maintaining his dignity to the end, replied, "My son, you have won this battle, but the power you now possess will tempt you exactly as it tempted me. Beware of not repeating my mistakes." "That is precisely why I will never rule alone," Zeus replied. "I will share power with my brothers and create laws that not even I myself can ever break." Thus ended the reign of Kronos, the Titan who had governed during the Golden Age. Chained in Tartarus for his own crimes, he paid the price for having devoured his children out of fear of losing power. Uranus's curse had been fulfilled. As he had betrayed his father, so was he betrayed by his offspring. The humans of the Golden Age, created during his reign, were the most perfect race that ever existed. When they died after centuries of full life, they became beneficial daemons who protected future generations. Later races never achieved that lost perfection. In the fields, farmers continued to invoke Kronos' name during harvests, remembering the god who had brought abundance to the world. His scythe, which once castrated the sky, became a symbol of the harvest that feeds mortals. Thus remained the story of the last of the Titans, the king who created a paradise and destroyed it with his own hands, victim of the same fear that had brought him to power.